That was my attempt at the moon in Pokemon Ruby. I'm sure you've seen a couple of these via hoax videos or ROM hacks, but what was unique about what you just saw was that it was played on real hardware. Nothing but my Game Boy Advanced and a copy of Pokemon Ruby. Well, they did get a little help from these. The Nintendo e-reader and a custom e-card that I made for it. About 1 year ago, I released my first set of DLC for Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire. This was done by going into the code of the EonTicket e-card and changing some values around. This card lets me send custom Gen 3 scripting language commands to a designated location in your Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire save file called ramscript. And the scripting language has a command that lets me call custom assembly code, which basically lets me do anything that I want in the game. Since then, I've released 2 more sets of cards, including one for Pokemon Emerald. One was just for Pokemon Jirachi, putting it in the infamous White Rock in Suitopolis, and the other was a set of cards for the legendary beasts, Entei, Raikou, and Suicune. For them, I made puzzles that take you all across Hoenn to sort of mimic how their roaming counterparts in Fire Red and Leaf Green would work. My goal with these events has always been to make them feel authentic. I wanted them to be just like the real thing, indistinguishable from Birth Island, Naval Rock, or Faraway Island. All the Pokemon caught in them read as fully legal to any hack check, official or otherwise, and I always used official terms in the dialogue when I could. But the truth is, they could never feel that way, because they were missing a few key things, as many of you were keen to point out in my previous videos. The first one is that these events were taking place in already existing locations, which is true. I had to use Meteor Falls, Petalburg Woods, or the White Rock. But none of the real events were like that. They all got a fully new, unique location, and sometimes they would come with puzzles. They had no real visuals. Sure, I could add earthquakes or flashing lights, but why do Entei and Deoxys show up when I talk to a boulder or a Pokeball? There's no sprite there. Where is it? So why didn't my previous events have things like this? Don't the real events add sprites and locations when you get them? Well, no. All the event locations, items, and everything are already programmed into your cartridge. Receiving the event doesn't change anything. It just gives you the item in your bag and then tells the game it's okay for you to go to that specific location. The actual tickets don't even do anything on their own. It's why if you ever used an action replay to give yourself the old C map, you couldn't go to Faraway Island. The flag was not set for it. That would actually be a separate code. On top of all of this, I have less than 1 kilobyte of space to work with. So, yeah, not only do I need to figure out how to put custom sprites into the game, change the entire map, I also need to figure out how to get more space. And then if I do all of that, I can bring the rumors to life. And I really wanted to. Even with my original Deoxys event, I desperately wanted to go to the moon, and I just couldn't figure out how to do it at the time. And I also have a few other rumors in mind that I'm going to bring to life here. This time, though, I'm not going to bore you with all the programming stuff. I know it's very dense, and it can be psych! This took a lot of work, and you're going to learn everything that I learned. There's going to be assembly. I'm going to show you how to navigate the decomp. It's going to be a riot. So, let's cover how I changed the map. Now, you may be looking at the title of this section, How I Changed the Map, and think, well, that's weird. Isn't Blisy going to make a new map? Well, yes and no. I'm going to make an entirely new map by changing the one that you're currently on and faking it really, really well. And I've actually known how to do this for some time via a script command called setMetaTile, although it's very limiting. SetMetaTile lets you specify an X and Y coordinate and then change that coordinate to any tile ID you would want, while also specifying if you want to be able to walk over that tile. The issue here is how big of a command this is. It takes up 9 bytes to change one tile. Ramscript, the special location I'm using in the save file, only has 995 bytes to work with, a pitiful amount. I first tried to make very simple maps by using a couple of looping commands, which kind of worked, but it still took up far too much space, especially if I wanted any meaningful detail. Now, it's true that I have discovered more space via unused stuff in the save file, but really, I still have a hard limit on the size that I can do. Once I go over the size of 2 eCard.code strips, the game will always reject the eCards that I scanned. And the way I get information into the extra space I found was really inefficient. I was using write byte to address, which at the cost of 6 bytes stores 1 byte into the game somewhere. This means I could maybe squeeze an extra 500 bytes before the game rejects my cards. It's actually the exact same problem as set meta tile. Also, I was never really happy with the space that I had found anyway. My scripts break if you ever walk into the house in Moss Deep in Ruby and Sapphire, or in Sutopolis in Emerald, or into the Battle Tower in either game. This makes a lot of people worry, thinking that I broke the Battle Tower permanently on that save or something. It doesn't, by the way. All you risk doing is deleting my code. The tower and e-card room will continue working perfectly fine. Space would also be an issue for sprites. If I wanted a custom sprite like Mew or Deoxys in Ruby, which don't exist in that game, I would need to make it. And one single direction of a sprite is 100 bytes. So I would really have to be smart about shrinking the amount of space that I have to the maximum, and then probably finding even more somewhere else. So the first thing I did in regards to the space was take set meta tile and throw it in the garbage. After a lot of analysis, I followed the logical commands of where the game goes when it's doing set meta tile. This is called tracing, and it's something you have to do a lot to understand how this type of stuff works when you're doing this type of hacking or programming. In the end, I found out where the game writes its map tile twos to actually use for loading a map or loading a new tile via set meta tile. Then, with the help of my friend Xiao, we wrote a 15 instruction program to write what tiles I want to specific locations, and we wrote that in GBA Thumb assembly, a very compact language. So 15 instructions is 30 bytes, which might seem like it's more than the 9 bytes that I was trying to save originally. But this program doesn't just run once, it repeats itself over and over and over again until it completely makes the entire map. So I'm actually saving a byte every single time it places a tile, and eventually, when I place more than 30 tiles, because these are big maps, the program eventually saves so much more space. I haven't actually calculated it, but it's a lot. And it's actually not just one small program, it's 2 small programs. One for tiles I intend to repeat more than twice, and one I do not. For the repetition tiles, we store the location of the initial position of them, how many times we're going to repeat the tile, which tile ID it is, and how much the value of the position will be incrementing by. We don't store the increment by or repetition amount for single placement tiles. Even with a program this small, the maps I ended up making were pretty big, and the storage section for all the information I had was huge. Each map I made was bigger than the last. The moon here is actually the least complex of them all. Making maps this way was extremely tedious. I would first create it in Advanced Map, a ROM hacking program. Then I would have to manually write all the bytes into this demonic Excel spreadsheet that my friend Hefe made for me. I have to write each tile individually. Very, very annoying. Once that's done, we pretty much have a new map. But you'd be mistaken if you thought that's all there was to it. These in-game locations don't usually just have nothing to do and then an encounter with a Pokemon. Well, I guess Naval Rock and Southern Island are like that, but Birth Island has a puzzle, and Faraway Island has a little game with Mew. So I've got to edit the NPCs that are on this map as well to create some interesting environments. Luckily, the scripting language for Gen 3 games does have the ability for me to move NPCs to different locations, but changing their sprite and functionality was a little bit more difficult. In fact, the only reason I was able to figure out how to change NPC information was because of this ace code to respawn the roaming Lati in Ruby and Sapphire. This code assigns a different script to this Route 101 NPC, and I thought, that's really cool. So I asked Sleipnir, who wrote the code, how he did it, and he told me where in RAM the NPC information was. This doesn't just contain their script though, it contains all of their information. What their X and Y coordinate is, what sprite they're using, what movement type they are, etc. So now I can fully change what the NPCs are and what they do on the map. On the moon, I use this to turn 2 of the people from the Space Center into Clefairies by using the Clefairy doll sprite for the secret bases. And then I also turned someone into a moonstone that you can pick up. Lastly, I turned the professor that you initially talked to into a boulder. And now I've got a fully functional moon that I think looks pretty real. Lastly, with the map, we have one very big problem. If I ever save the game and reload it, the map is completely destroyed. This is because the game only saves the nearest 256 tiles to you, to preserve stuff like cut trees or cut down grass. Basically, if it's viewable on screen, it will persist across the save, otherwise it won't. After that, when you reload the save, whatever map ID you're on will actually just reload the entire map. So I either have to figure out a way to save my custom maps or prevent the user from saving. This was surprisingly easy to do, but it took forever to find a way. In Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, all I have to do is set this variable to a 0 instead of a 1. It's called flash memory preset. When it's 0, the game refuses to save and shows this error message. So at the start of my script, I set it to 0, and when you leave my custom area, it's back to a 1. So I've got this convincing map and a pretty fun, area to explore. But I wanted to do more with it. And to do that, I would need more free space. And I knew exactly what I wanted to do, but not necessarily how. You see, in my previous video about Raikou, Suicune, and Entei, I got this comment from a user called the Gears of Progress, asking me why I didn't use the empty space at the end of the Hall of Fame. Apparently, there's around 1900 bytes there that are entirely unused. He mentioned in his comments that he was using it for a project that he was working on, which, by the way, is insanely cool. It's a transfer method for Gen 1 and 2 Pokemon into Gen 3 called PokeTransporter GB. It's very polished and it looks like something that could have been official back in the day. Links to the GitHub repo and a video demonstration will be in the description. Anyway, when I investigated this space, it turns out the Hall of Fame isn't exactly a normal place that I can access anytime I want. It's on the flash memory chip. You see, the way the game works when it saves and loads the game is that it loads the save file from this separate chip and dumps all of it into the main RAM chip on the GBA. And every time you save, it writes the save file back to that flash chip. And you cannot read or write to this chip without special commands that the game has for doing that. So I reached out to Gears of Progress to see what he did in order to read and write to this space, and he was very helpful. He helped me find the commands for reading and writing, as well as where in Emerald these commands dump information to. He also explained how the save files are stored because it's weirder than you think. For some reason, the Hall of Fame data is not stored with the rest of your save. It's in a separate allocated chunk. Think of this as like partitioning a hard drive if you've ever done that. Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire has 5 of these, 2 for your main save data, and it rotates between the 2 of these chunks. They're just redundancy in case one of them ever gets corrupted. Then, it has 8192 bytes for the Hall of Fame. Then, it has 2 more chunks that are entirely unused, each being 4096 bytes. Now, normally you would have to be very careful with this. The way the data is stored, it has a few checks it performs to see if everything is good when it loads data off of the chip. And if they don't pass this check, you'll get an error. Typical checksum and magic number type stuff. But the commands that we found to read and write to this chip do not ever look at the checksums, so I don't even have to calculate them. And since the game never accesses this space in normal gameplay, it can never accidentally see what I put in there and then delete it when it fails the check. It's just a free 4 kilobyte I have access to that I can access with literally 10 lines of code. It is amazing. All I had to do was find out where the game stores the preload script, which is a small kind of script that the game runs while it's transferring the e-reader card over to see if you're allowed to play the event or something. But I store a bunch of information in there, and then I call the built-in game function try_write_sector to store all of my custom assembly stuff while the game is on this screen. Then, the first thing my actual script does when you're in the game is called the do_read_flash_whole_section function, and it will dump all the contents of that save sector somewhere in the GBA's RAM that I specify. It's such a clean solution. No more worrying about the battle tower or anything like that. You can just play the game entirely normally. On top of this, I now have an unbelievable amount of free space. 4 kilobytes is so much that I feel like a god. And god I shall play. I used this extra space to store sprites that don't exist naturally in the game. And well, here we are. A Deoxys sprite in Pokemon Ruby. This sprite isn't in the game, and I was able to work up a big fat hack to make my events, well, more eventful. For future stuff, I plan on making this in a better way, but basically, all I do is change where the game is pointing to for a sprite. The game stores all the sprites here in G sprites. In this glob of data, there is a value. It is pointing to where the Groudon sprite is stored in the game's data. I overwrite this where I stored my Deoxys sprite. I literally Control-C, Control-V'd out of Pokemon Emerald, and that's pretty much it. This type of hack won't stand up to any persistence, like bringing up the pause menu or getting into a wild battle. But since I'm only introducing it in a very controlled scenario, it works for now. And, well, that's it. I can now make a new area to explore with new NPCs and new sprites, all with just the e-reader and no modifications to your copy of Ruby or Sapphire. So let's showcase what I did. I said before that I wanted to bring rumors to life, and I meant it. The first one is, which has been the example the whole time, going to the moon to capture Deoxys. This one was around during elementary and early middle school for me, and it was that if the rocket in the Moss Deep Space Center hits 100 launches, you can take the next one to the moon, where there would be a Deoxys. I've heard some people say that this rumor was for Jirachi, but I already did a Jirachi event, so we're doing Deoxys. I also wanted there to be some personality to this event and have a nod to the official one. So the way it works is that you have to talk to this boulder here, and when you do, it gets teleported to a new location. You have to get to the boulder in the least amount of possible steps before you talk to it again. This is actually exactly how it works in Pokemon Emerald as well. If you take too many steps, you fail and the puzzle is reset. If you do it in just the right amount, it goes to a new location. You have to do this repeatedly until you battle Deoxys. You'll also notice some new decorations here, which are the previously mentioned Clefairies and a Moonstone. The Moonstone is there to pick up if you want, and the Clefairies are actual battles. When caught, they will read as fully legal Clefairies from the Fire Red Game Corner. There's 2 of them here. This is a good time to mention that all of these encounters can be shiny hunted as runaways or RNG manipulated using Method 1. I had to make them runaways, despite that actually not being a feature in Ruby and Sapphire, because otherwise you'd have to replay the entire event every time since saving is disabled. Anyway, once you catch the Clefairies, or not, it's not required, we can finish up the puzzle and see Deoxys. You can run away from it as well. After you catch it, the game automatically teleports you home. Up next is a classic, Mew under the truck. Now, I know what you're thinking. Blisy, this isn't Kanto. Well, that's what we have this boat for. After scanning this e-card, if you head to Slateport, the SS Tidal will take you to Vermilion City docks in Kanto. Unfortunately, it seems like some work is being done on them, but there is some room to explore, and if you surf to the right, you'll find an extended dock with a truck on it. Seems like there's something under the truck. What? It's a Mew? This Mew reads as a fully legal emerald from Faraway Island. As with the moon, you can also do runaways to shiny hunt this Mew, and it's Method 1 to RNG manipulate. And for shiny hunters, I put in a little bonus. If you notice, before the battle, May turns right to face the Mew. When you run, she will turn up to face the truck automatically, so you can just mash A to do the re-encounter. Handy, huh? After catching the Mew, it appears there's nothing else to do, and you can head back by talking to the sailor. It might seem a bit odd to do this in Ruby and Sapphire instead of trying to get this to work in Fire Red and Leaf Green, but I thought it was kind of funny and an interesting way to bring this rumor to life. Now, the next one seems to be one not many people have heard of, but it was a big part of why I played Ruby and Sapphire so much as a kid. The rumor was that if you beat the Elite Four 100 times, the Submarine Explorer 1 would return and you could take it to Johto to get one of the starter Pokemon there. This was a big deal to me because, well, Totodile and Feraligatr are my favorite Pokemon, and there was no way to get them when I was playing Ruby and Sapphire as a kid. I didn't have a GameCube, so I couldn't play Coliseum, and Emerald was like 3 years later. I was in elementary school when Ruby and Sapphire came out, and I was about to enter high school when Emerald released, so it was quite a gap. Anyway, what I did was remove the 100 Elite Four requirement, and then I let you talk to the Submarine Explorer 1 whenever you want after you scan the e-card. This sub will take you to a recreation of New Barktown, where you can talk to Professor Elm. You'll startle him, and he'll drop a random Pokeball, which is one of the 3 Johto starters. It'll pop up with a little sprite, and you'll battle. When you catch it, it's got Emerald Legality, being the one Birch gives you for completing the Hoenn Pokédex. There's 2 other NPCs here. They just say various generic stuff. I, of course, had to put the Science is Amazing person, though. Anyway, after you're done, you can go back to the sub, talk to it, and leave, and you'll be put on the Slateport dock. The final event is of Mewtwo, which wasn't even designed by me. My friend Tamahiro designed the map. It's based off of this Mewtwo card, where they're surrounded by huge buildings. There's a catch, though. These last few months have been pretty tough for me, and I haven't quite had time to finalize it. I originally wanted this entire video out in early May or late April even, which obviously I have botched quite badly. So stay tuned for a short in the coming weeks where I showcase and release that events. In fact, all of these events are going to be released officially via a short. Deoxys will be available for download right away in this video, and early next week Mew will become available with an accompanying short. The week after that will be New Barktown, and we'll finish the releases off with Tama's Mewtwo. Let me know what you think of the release plan. I probably won't do something like this again, but it could still be fun to try it out. And if you're wondering how you get these events in the game, don't worry, I've made a full accompanying video for it. Link's going to be in the description and the pinned comment, and you can also see it on screen. This video completely contains entirely how I get these e-reader cards into the game, whether I have an e-reader or not. Lastly, I just want to thank all of you for your support through this time. As you know, my cat has been kind of sick lately, and I've been moving across country, so that's why there's been such delay in streams and videos like that. Streams are going to be resuming soon once I finish the move in about the next week or so. Streams will be resuming as normal, and hopefully I can get a more consistent video production schedule out now. And that's all. I hope everyone enjoys what I've showcased here. I hope you think it's as cool as I do. And let me know what your favorites are in the comments below. I know last time I said the legendary beasts were going to be my final e-cards, and obviously that happened to not be the case. But I will tell you this, I only have 2 more projects in mind for the e-cards. One, I'm not going to spoil, it's very unique, I think everybody's going to like it. And the other one, which is going to be my next set of events, is going to be the legendary birds from Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness. So look forward to that.